friends, if you're new to my channel, first of all, welcome. My name's Nicole and I'm here today to talk to you about kind of different American and British theater terminology. So if you don't know, I'm an American, I'm originally from North Carolina, and I'm currently living in London. I moved here in September, so I've been here about 9 months now. I've been working in the theater industry. I'm an intern in the development department at a nonprofit theater, and I also write for Broadway World UK. So I get around to a fair bit of theater. I have several British friends who kind of are involved in theater who go to RADA, and I have some other Australian friends who have lived here, so they also have kind of learned the terminology. And I'm fascinated by the differences in the language that we use in these different countries that both speak English to talk about theater. So I thought that I would make a whole video, which you might find helpful maybe if you're a British person going to New York and going to see a show, or if you're an American coming here to London to the West End to see a show, or if you're moving from one country to another, or just if you're interested. Also, please forgive me, the lighting is like changing a lot. There's a lot of cloud movement going on, so if there's some shifting going on, that is why. I made a list of ones that I could think of, and then I put kind of a call out on Twitter and got some really nice responses from people. So thank you so much to everyone who contributed to that. Also, if you can think of any that I don't include in this video, please do leave them in the comments down below. Let's have a discussion. Or if you think that there's any that, you know, maybe I got wrong, that are used in both places, just in different ways or something, let me know that as well. The first ones that I want to talk about are kind of the way that we talk about the theater itself. So a big one is that in the States, the kind of section of the audience closest to the stage is called the orchestra section. I believe the term comes from the fact that you're the people who are nearest to the orchestra in the pit underneath the stage. Here in the UK, that's typically referred to as the stalls. I'm not exactly sure where that term comes from. I'm sure it comes from somewhere, but that is one of the things that took me a while to get used to, is stalls versus orchestra. Similarly, and these are more interchangeable and kind of depend more on the theater, but often in a Broadway theater, you would call the first kind of level of balcony the mezzanine, whereas here it's often called the dress circle or just the circle or some variation on that. I don't think I've ever heard the term mezzanine used in the UK, although dress circle and circle are sometimes used in the US. I do think that both countries tend to use balcony for the highest level though, although that differs, and boxes are still what the kind of, well, boxes on the side are typically called. Another major difference, and one that I had to get used to and that now I'm kind of stuck in the British term of using, is intermission versus interval. This is a kind of 15 to 20 minute break, typically between acts 1 and 2. Most musicals have them, some plays have them, some plays also will have a pause if it's like a very long play, but in the UK it's called an interval. And in the US, it's called intermission. I also have been made fun of for calling the halftime show of the Super Bowl an intermission before. But so that's another big one. And I do find most people know what you mean if you say one or the other, like to someone who works front of house or something, but it's nice to try and make an attempt to use the correct word. While we're speaking about, you know, talking to front of house staff, one other one that I find is different is in the UK, it's most often called a cloakroom. It's the place where you can, you know, store your coat or your luggage or whatever that you have with you during the show, whereas in the US, that's typically referred to as a coat check. It can be called cloakroom occasionally in like an older theater, but I find most often people will say coat check or something like that. While we're on kind of things in the theater, in the UK, it's always referred to as box office. It's the place that you go to get your tickets. In the US, box office is often used, but occasionally they will call that will call, which can create some confusion if you're in London and asking where will call is, because they might not know what you're talking about. So that's kind of one that I think is used. Box office is used in both countries, but will call is used in the States and isn't used in the UK as much. Actually, one that I looked up and found very interesting is there's a lot of talk, obviously, in the theater community about theater ER versus theater RE. In the UK, I almost always see it spelled with the RE at the end instead of the ER. That's how it's used kind of in all contexts, whereas in the US, technically, although this isn't accepted by everyone, but I think technically the approved thing is that theater with an RE on the end refers to the art form. Theater with an ER on the end refers to the building. So like you would say, you know, the Richard Rogers Theater with an ER, but if you say, oh, I really want to work in theater, it would be an RE. One thing that I find interesting is in the US, we would just say community theater or maybe local theater to talk about, small, semi-professional or amateur productions. And in the UK, they have this term AMDRAM, which took me forever to figure out what that meant. It stands for amateur drama, but they say AMDRAM, and it was very confusing to me. That's one that I actually was like, what is that? And kind of had to figure it out based on context clues. So that's a really interesting one to me, that we don't kind of have the equivalent of that in the US. One that I found really interesting talking to some Australians on Twitter was in the there's a lot of different terms that are used for kind of whenever a show ends and you're moving the set and everything involved with it out of the theater. Often in the UK that's called a get out. That term is used in the US, although loadout is also occasionally used. But apparently in Australia it's called a bump out, and in New Zealand it's called a pack out. So if there are any Australians or New Zealanders or people from other, Canadians or something that have other phrases for words that I've talked about in this video, I would love to hear them, because I'm fascinated by the fact that we all speak the same language but use different terms for something as simple as like getting the set out of the theater. Now, there is a practice in both the West End and on Broadway where you can go to a theater on the morning of and stand in line and get a ticket from the box office. And in the UK, we refer to that as day seating, which makes sense. You're getting your seat on the day of. In Broadway, it's called rush seating typically. I think occasionally you hear the opposite term used in either country, but typically I think it is fairly separated. So I highly recommend both in either country. One of the last terms that I have is cover versus understudy. Now, I think understudy is definitely used in both countries, but cover is something that I've only really ever heard here in the UK, I think. It's used a lot less on Broadway. On Broadway, you typically would just say first understudy, second understudy, whereas here, for example, there are roles like Valjean and Les Mis. I think it's definitely used in Les Mis a lot. Like I'm trying to think. I was like, okay, yeah, cover Enjolras, cover Valjean, cover Javert. Wear my Les Mis shirt, so this works. I'm not exactly sure if there's actually any difference in what it means. I think it just kind of refers to the pecking order, if you will, of who goes on if an actor is off. But I have found I don't think that's one that we use in the States, although I could be wrong. While we're talking about differences in US and UK theater, one thing that I find really interesting is that UK theaters almost all sell ice cream during the interval / intermission, which is a thing that I can't think of any Broadway theater I've ever been in that sells ice cream, but that's a really fun part of UK theater that I like a lot. Of course, I am semi-lactose intolerant, so I typically try to stay away from it because I don't want to, risk feeling horrible through the second half of the show. Although occasionally I will buy one and just take a Lactaid pill and hope for the best. We're bright again. What is going on? The last thing I wanted to talk about, which isn't really a terminology difference, it's more of just an actual theater difference, but I did want to address it, is programs versus playbills. Now, on Broadway, and I think most off-Broadway as well, you get a playbill whenever you enter the theater. It's included in the price of your ticket, and it has information on it about who's in the show and the show itself, some ads, whatnot. They've got those iconic covers with the yellow at the top, except for right now because it's currently Pride Month. So we have Pride playbills, which are some of my favorite things in the world because they're so fun. I'm still so proud that I have a Les Mis Pride playbill, but it's kind of included in kind of just what you get whenever you buy your ticket. Now, most Broadway theaters, which I don't know that all people know this, also have programs for sale, but they're typically the kind of big glossy kind. I don't have any of either with me right now from Broadway because they're all at home in the States, but a lot of the Broadway programs look more like this. They're full of big glossy photos, and it's kind of something that you can buy in addition to having the information on the cast in your playbill. Now, my favorite thing about getting the playbill is that if you have an understudy on, there will always be a small slip of paper in the playbill telling you who's on and what role they're playing. And that's something that's really nice because I find in a lot of UK theaters, sometimes an understudy will go on and it's not written anywhere, there's no announcement made, so you may not even know unless maybe you follow some cast members on Twitter or you're really well versed in the show. Now, in the UK, there's several different types of programs that you can buy depending on the theater that you're at. Some theaters will only have one. So here, for example, I have The Grinning Man, which had in it some, the cast list, obviously, some photos, cast bios, some information about the show itself. There's Victor Hugo. This is my signed program, so there's, you can't see it that well on camera, but there's Louis Maskell's signature. But this is kind of the standard for what a show will have. Some shows though, like Les Mis, and I don't have my other Les Mis one here with me, also sell a big glossy kind of picture-based thing that has some more information about the show, but mainly as a way to show off the really nice production photos. Then there are other theaters that instead of doing that just have one, which, like, for example, the Donmar Warehouse do these tall, thin ones that have in them information about the cast, but then also will have in some information about the theater itself and different ads and stuff in them. I'm really fond of the Donmar ones. I like that they all match perfectly. So, like, I have 4 now. I will have 5 by the time I leave the UK. And they all say Donmar on the back and have kind of the same setup on the front, which is nice. Not Spawn, I just interned there. There are also occasionally you find these which are interesting because they're bound a little bit differently. They have more of, I don't know if you can see that, it's almost like a mini book binding on them. This is from The Play That Goes Wrong. And again, this one kind of has the photos in it and the cast info. And actually The Play That Goes Wrong is really fun because, oh, we're dark again. I'm so sorry about this lighting. Wow, I didn't know it was going to be this bad. But it's really fun because it has like a fake program in the front. And then finally, the other kind that you find is the square kind, which this one is from Red, which has information on the cast and crew in it. There's Alfred Molina and Alfie Enoch. But then also has kind of stuff about, like, this one has stuff about Rothko in it because that's who it's about. Has information on different things. So this is kind of all that you can get there, which makes sense, I guess, because not everything is like Les Mis and can sell a big glossy program. But so that's kind of my overview of programs versus playbills. If anyone's interested, I could do a whole video on that whenever I'm home again in September and could kind of show off some playbills and programs. I've been thinking actually about once I'm home doing a video about like my playbill collection and then my program collection. If that's something that you would like to see, do let me know in the comments down below. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, if you can think of any other differences that you know of, or if you think that I made an error in any of my terms, which is very possible, I've only lived here in the UK for 9 months, do let me know in the comments. Let me know kind of what you think about this difference in terminology, where you think it comes from. If you know any of the history of these terms, I would be really interested to hear that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again actually on Wednesday for a special vlog video, so do keep a lookout for that. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, to subscribe to my channel if you're not already, because that totally would make my day. And I will leave my links to my social medias and my blog down below if you'd like to follow me other places on the internet. Have a great week, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye! And I'm so sorry for the lagging of this video. Blame the UK weather.